Good morning, YouTube. Warbles on a lot here. Sunday, the 26th of March. Just getting ready for the roundtable discussion.
Hearing David Marr and Pauline Hanson on Philip Adams' Late Night Live. Well, it's now time for the Sunday roundtable. What did you think about those activists targeting companies about same-sex marriage? First, they shamed the Adelaide brewer Coopers into pledging allegiance to marriage equality. That was after its ties with the Bible Society were exposed. Then they condemned IBM over a senior executive's link to a Christian group that opposes any broadening of the traditional definition of marriage. And all this comes after 34 corporate leaders signed an unprecedented letter lobbying the PM to legalise same-sex marriage. Here's Tim Reid, he's the CEO of the business software firm MYOB, on RN Breakfast on why he signed the letter to the PM.
I signed it because it's important to me personally, but more so because it's an important business issue. We outlined in the letter the case for this. We think that it's important for employees, we think it's important for customers, we think it's important for our nation. We think our businesses will be stronger when we're able to implement marriage equality and for the nation to move forward from there. It's really important for us that every single team member come to work and do the best that they can do, be the best that they can be, and make the largest contribution that they possibly can. And so I think this has been a growing issue in the community, but I signed it for those reasons.
That's Tim Reid, one of those CEOs who signed a letter to the PM promoting marriage equality. Now, in response, the Federal Minister, Peter Dutton, told those business leaders to, quote, stick to their knitting. So what does this controversy tell us? Should corporate leaders speak out on social issues like same-sex marriage? And if they do, are they fair game? And do the Coopers beer boycott and the targeting of that IBM executive, does that show that some activists for gay marriage prefer bullying to persuasion? Well, let's turn to our Sunday roundtable. Jeremy Samet is a senior fellow at the Centre of Independent Studies in Sydney. G'day, Jeremy.
Hi, Tom.
Jane Caro is no stranger to the ABC, a prominent social commentator, writer and lecturer. Good to see you again, Jane.
Hi, Tom.
And Toby Ralph is a marketing, strategy and communications consultant. He's a regular on the transfer and the drum too. Good morning, Toby.
Good morning.
Jane, should CEOs be participating in the social policy debate?
Sure, if they want to. I mean, they're citizens of this country. They have a right to speak out. If they think that there's a business reason for doing so, more the better. But in fact, it would seem to me that the government is only too happy when business leaders speak out in praise of penalty cuts to penalty rates or to, tax cuts and things like that. And so therefore they have to accept it when they speak out on issues that perhaps the government don't agree with.
And your argument too is that by tapping into this progressive mindset, it's actually helping their brands as well,
yes.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly, I think you mentioned the Coopers, kerfuffle about a week or so ago. Yeah. The tragedy for Coopers was that it's a trendy beer. So they totally misjudged their market. Now, I don't think they meant to. I think that was just a whole lot of errors and that Coopers were harshly dealt with. I think that they were very harshly dealt with. But from a marketing perspective, Coopers beer is quite trendy. They needed to think about their market and how their market was likely to respond. Also, business leaders aren't stupid. 80% of Australians or more are in favour of equal marriage. So they're looking at their market and they're going, you know what, we're recruiting people from this community, we're selling to people from this community, and there's a whole lot of people who sympathise.
What about that, Jeremy? I mean, should corporations feel the need to weigh into these controversial social issues?
Look, I don't think it is the role of public companies to dabble in cultural politics. I think it's a diversion from, under this rubric of corporate social responsibility, from what their real mission is, which is to maximise value for shareholders. However, I sort of half agree with Jane, and I think business leaders are smart and they are concerned about the values of their brand, and they realise that they need to manage the reputational risks that surround an issue like marriage equality, because the tactics of the marriage equality movement seem to be, I think the Coopers case shows this, is to say, if you don't support this, you'll end up being slandered as a bigot for not supporting diversity. Now, I think that's a tribute of sorts that they got Coopers to back down to the tactics of the marriage equality movement, but I think that those sort of tactics are pretty deplorable in a democratic society, and I think it undercuts the whole idea that marriage equality is this great pluralist crusade for tolerance, and I think in the long run it could actually be counterproductive for the cause.
Yeah, well, I mean, now's as good a time as any to say that we did make contact with about half of those CEOs. If they wanted to come onto the program, they declined. But let's bring you in, Toby. Your thoughts about all this. Should CEOs use the time and money of their public companies to push a social agenda?
No. The business of business is business. It's pretty straightforward. You know, Alan Joyce, for example, has got a couple of jobs. First, he's got to get planes from A to B without hitting C. And secondly, he's got to make a quid for his shareholders. And that should frame his thinking. If he gets engaged in social policy that has no direct relevance to the transport business, it's kind of doing the opposite of his job. You know, a democratic society elects people to manage our social policy. I don't want our cultural policies to be run by unelected big business.
Yeah, well, you've been in the corporate world for a while, Toby. Would these CEOs have consulted their shareholders before they advocate these kind of issues in open letters to the Prime Minister?
I don't think that. I mean, take the example of Qantas. You know, Qantas isn't a person. It flies 50 million people a year. It's got hundreds of thousands of shareholders. It's got tens of thousands of employees. We know, if you look at the current same-sex marriage research, 68% of people support it, 32% against. To say that your company is behind it, I think, is a misrepresentation. They would have probably taken a. It's interesting, you know. There's a circumstance in which I'd favour them taking a social policy on same-sex marriage. If some cynic in the marketing department had worked out that through research a pro stance would increase customer stickiness, loyalty and traffic, then I'd vote for it. Ironically, if they made a moral decision here, I think that's immoral.
Yeah, but Toby, Jane would argue, and she's not alone here, that there's a vacuum of political leadership in Canberra and governments have abdicated the kind of moral and ethical leadership. Jane, business should be stepping in to fill the void, right?
Well, whether they should or they shouldn't, where there's a vacuum, somebody will step in and fill the void. And the problem is it's the logical outgrowth of neoliberalism, which says the government should really get out of the way and let, you know, business run things. Well, business will run things and it'll run other things, not just business, because we are to an extent rudderless in terms of leadership, in terms of ethical leadership. We're not getting much of that. We're not getting much of any political leadership at the moment. And so where there is a vacuum, companies step in, and there's more to it than that. Companies are being asked, and high wealth individuals, to take over things like supporting the arts, social justice, all that kind of stuff. Well, you can't ask people to put their money into those causes, but shut their mouths. So unfortunately, when you do that, you have to take the fact that they're going to speak up on behalf of those causes too.
Yeah. Jeremy, you're from the Centre of Independent Studies, a well-known think tank that champions small government, free markets. It's often called the bastion of neoliberalism. How would you respond to Jane?
I don't think Jane's correct about the idea that government hasn't retreated from a lot of areas of the economy and social policy in general. What's actually happening around the issue of marriage equality is that it's a sign that the left controls the commanding heights of the culture. So the media, the universities, and increasingly business, as we've seen recently with the campaigning around marriage equality. The problem for politicians is if they speak out on issues like marriage and make the traditional case for marriage, they often get slammed. So I think the culture works the other way.
Surely politicians can deal with getting slammed.
I think there is. We talked about risk averseness before. There is a risk averseness within the political class in general. That what is the point of speaking out in this when you will simply be slammed across Fairfax and across the ABC for taking a traditional stance around marriage?
We'll get to that in a moment. But Toby, if these CEOs do champion positions on social issues, isn't it fair game for them to be criticised as, say, the Federal Minister Peter Dutton did recently?
I think it is. I mean, personally, I have little sympathy for Dutton in this case, but I think if you stick your head above the rampants here, I just think it's wildly inappropriate. You know, if we're talking about abortion, do we really seek out the views of Toys R Us? And if we're nattering about euthanasia, do we say, you know, what does Sports Girl think about it? You know, what's Mortgage Choice have to say about refugee policy? It's ridiculous.
If you've just tuned in, welcome to our Sunday Roundtable. My guests are Jeremy Samet, Jane Caro and Toby Ralph. We're discussing whether corporate leaders should speak out on social issues like same-sex marriage, and if they do, are they fair game? Now, of course, the flip side to this, Jane, as we've just partly touched on, question, why should activists shame executives for holding different opinions to the company positions on, say, something like same-sex marriage?
Yeah, look, activists will operate in the way that activists do, and they feel very strongly about this. I mean, I think the thing we have to recognise is for proponents of same-sex marriage, and I'm one of them, but particularly those people who are desperately wanting to marry someone they love, this is about their human rights. So they don't tend to be quite as calm and cool and reasonable as perhaps we are about some other issues. That is because they feel it very viscerally, they feel it very personally. And whenever you get into those things where you're interfering in people's personal lives in terms of what they can and cannot do, you tend to get a much, much more aggressive response.
So is this activism then justified only in the case of, say, progressive causes?
No, not at all. And indeed, we have seen Bill Leak, we have seen the desire to repeal 18C, one presumes, so that people can be slammed on the other side. So I don't think you can have it both ways. I don't think you can say free speech should run, rampant. Anyone should be allowed to say anything they like, and that's a really prized ideal. Oh, but CEOs can't do it. If they do it, they can expect to get criticised. I think that Coopers was badly judged and unfairly judged. But people have a right to express their opinion about what a brand does, and they have a right to boycott that brand if they feel strongly about the way that brand behaves. That's part of being a free market.
Jeremy, other people, and these are folks who read the Australian newspaper, the Daily Telegraph this week, they take a different view to Jane. Here's Miranda Devine this week. It's got to the stage where the Australian Christian lobby has had to remove the names of board members from its websites because its directors are being viciously targeted and abused by same-sex marriage bullies.
Look, I can understand and sympathise with gay people's search for acceptance and broader social acceptance as well. However, this is where I think the activists' campaigns can be counterproductive, and it can actually turn people off the marriage equality cause. We've been told all along that extending the right to marriage to gay people won't affect the rights of other people. But there is mounting evidence that it actually is going to affect the rights of other people, particularly around issues of religious freedom. We've been told by the activists that there won't be any attempt to amend anti-discrimination laws which give exemptions for religious groups. But I think those promises are sounding more and more hollow, particularly in light of the Coopers and the IBM case. And we're getting to the stage now where I think it will turn people off, and we're seeing a similar reaction. I think there's a chance we'll see a similar reaction that we saw around Trump, around Brexit, and around the rise of One Nation here, is that people resent having politically correct views forced down their throat, and they seek a way of expressing their dissent from being told what they should think and what we should and shouldn't debate.
Well, Toby, how would you respond to that charge that the activists are deeply illiberal and that their tactics, as Jeremy says, may well be counterproductive?
I think it's entirely correct. I think we're seeing the rise of a new McCarthyism, quite frankly.
New McCarthyism. Yep.
Yeah, I think on both sides of the debate, I think it's part of it is caused by the echo chamber of social media, people reinforcing their own views all the time, either way, be it right or left. Part of it is caused by the 20% decline in quality journalism in the country because media is going broke and we can't afford investigative units. And
they're polarising times, aren't they, Toby?
They are, and politics is fragmenting. And society tends to be dividing. I think it's a tragedy. I'm all for free speech, entirely fiercely for free speech, but I think some people abuse it.
There's no doubt that some people abuse it. However, I would just like to point out that I've always said that marriage equality is like votes for women, and you may remember the
the civil rights in the United States in the 60s, they say.
Yeah, but even more importantly, votes for women, and you may remember the suffragettes and the tactics they took to actually get votes through for women. And yet when Votes for Women actually finally was enacted, exactly what they said would happen happened. Nothing. It didn't affect anything. It didn't change the world. It changed the world for women. So, yes, activists, some of them use tactics that I personally disagree with. But I think that what you find in these kinds of fights is often it gets very heated before we can get change. But I don't agree with Jeremy that the activity, yes, it makes people who don't like it less, So what? They didn't like it in the first place. Sometimes you have to get very, very, determined before you get what is right and just.
But were feminists and champions of civil rights in the 60s targeting employers and calling on them to resign?
I don't think they were. I think they were making them more.
There we go on the upload limit. Back immediately.